What Larry just mentioned about the fact that the content was interesting is, to me, one of the great unspoken secrets of working in a customer transaction. Many years ago, I was giving a seminar in Washington, D.C., and at one point in the middle of the seminar, everybody in the room suddenly got up, while I was still talking, walked over the window. Not just because I was boring, but because a brand new garbage truck had driven up on the lawn right outside our seminar room. And so I said, okay, kids, let's stop the seminar and let's talk to the people with the garbage truck. Turned out there was a waste management seminar who was giving a seminar next door to mine on their new truck. And these people were so excited about this truck. I went over and talked to them and said, you know, this is our latest model. It has computerized load monitoring. It transmits information wirelessly back to headquarters. They reroute our trucks in real time. We all communicated with each other. We work as a team. And these guys felt like they were the Michael Jordans of the trash business. And what I reflected on as I went back to class, this was many years ago back in my technical days. I originally came from the computer graphics field, and believe it or not, my first book that I ever wrote was actually a textbook on 3D computer graphics. It's knee-deep in equations. If you've ever seen the Dick Clark's Rocking New Year's Eve on New Year's Eve, and you've seen the DC logo that comes up at the end of it, I did that. And whenever I see that, I get that scummy taste of no sleep in my mouth. But what struck me is, back then I was teaching a workshop on computer graphics, and it struck me. I live in Los Angeles. I work with people doing special effects in Hollywood. These people are bored, jaded, they hate their jobs, they fight with each other. These people driving garbage trucks have so much interest and expertise in what they're doing, and that stuck with me for the rest of my life, listening to that. In this book that I wrote called Great Customer Connections, that this course is based on, Larry has a copy of it, I walk you through the mechanics of, well, what if you work at a slag heap? And I walk you through exactly what to say to sound like the smartest person at the slag heap in terms of where to park your truck, when the best time of day to come. Showing interest and showing expertise in what you're talking about is one of the most powerful things you can do to connect with a customer, and it's something that most people don't do. So I'm glad Larry brought up that point. I want to wrap up today by talking about your quote-unquote favorite customers and how you deal with them. Customers are human beings like anybody else, and as you folks mentioned earlier, I love the fact that the good things about working with people at EMQ was, you know, it's a learning experience and a growth experience. And the bad things, it's never boring and it's a learning experience and a growth experience. And among the one or two things I want you to take away from the seminar, this is the other thing I want you to take away with. Because it's simple, procedural, it goes against human nature, and it prevents most confrontations from escalating in the first place. It's what I call the can-can. This is what we were using when we were talking about what you say when you tow somebody's car away, was instead of saying you have to pay a fine to get your car back, you were talking about your car's in a safe place. I know where your car is. I know how you feel when situations like this happen. And that changed the dynamics of the situation. The can-can is nothing more than a formal way of triggering this sense of social cognition, this friend versus foe reflex that we all have in that first 30 seconds that we interact with somebody. And the reason that it works, and the reason that most people don't do it, is because when somebody comes to you and says, I want X, and you can't do X, all you can do is Y, which is much smaller than that, every fiber in our body wants to say, I can't do X. It feels funny, it almost feels disingenuous to say, I can do Y. But listen carefully. If you speak in terms of friend language instead of foe language, and acknowledge what it is that they do want, and then focus on what you can do, that changes the dynamics of most discussions. And so this is the one other thing I'm going to ask here. I promise you I'd only make you write down two things. This is the other thing that I want you to write down. Never, ever say no. Now, once again, I'm having one of these mind-reading moments. Rich is nuts. I have people that come to me who say things that are my fault when they're actually their fault. I have people asking me for things I can't do for them. I have people coming to me for services that we can't provide. How can I not say no? The way you not say no is to acknowledge what it is that they want and need, and then focus on what it is possible to them. And in any situation, there always is a can that you can lead with. So let's take a situation that can. Let's say that somebody comes to you and wants adult psychiatry, and guess what? You don't do adult psychiatry. Step one, what can you acknowledge about that? That they would like adult psychiatry. Very good. That's right. Okay, now, step two. let me get you some great referrals. That's exactly what the kind of that we're looking for is, you know, we're glad you've heard of us, and I know the right people to send you to, and here's what you can do. And then what if they come back and say, oh, but it takes like 2 months to get in with those people? That's horrible. Exactly. Okay. Okay, so you can still always acknowledge what it is that they're saying and feeling. And you're going to find that even if you're telling people things that isn't what they wanted or isn't what they needed, because of the language and the words that you're using and speaking to them, they're not going to get angry at you and they're not going to go off at you most of the time. But the other thing I want to look at before we wrap up today is what happens when people really do get angry. And in my view, most angry transactions can be prevented a lot more easily than they're managed. I mentioned earlier that I'm a veteran of something like 25,000 customer transactions, and I can count the number of people who've truly been angry with me in the fingers of maybe one hand. But the fact is that that means once every couple of years or so, or once every 3 years, I do have to diffuse a situation like that. And especially given the business that you folks work in, it's important to have the ability to defuse a crisis in your toolkit. I'm very humbled to be in a group that has a mobile crisis unit that works with families in crisis. You probably know as much about this as I do in some ways. As you know by now, I have a 3-step process for everything. And the techniques that I found works best in high urgency customer transactions is what I call the AAA approach, which stands for 3 steps that you do in order. Acknowledgement, which is acknowledging feelings and giving the problem importance. We've done a lot of this today, and you folks are very much on point with that. The next part, we've done a lot of this too, asking assessment questions. This way you're moving towards the pain, you're taking the emotion out of the situation, you're gathering information to help solve the problem. And then finally, you look at alternatives. This is nothing more than the can that we talked about earlier, where we acknowledge what it is that people want and then focus on what we can do. And your goal when somebody is very angry, I wish I had a phrase that would turn people from angry to non-angry. You people probably know better than anybody that anger is one of our most powerful and intimate emotions, and it's something that tends to wind down in stages. How many of you have never been an angry customer? I didn't expect to see any hands in response to that. It's a common shared experience that we all have, because we all have a point past which our buttons get pushed. And so the goal when you're trying to deal with somebody who is angry is to work in stages. And this is why this is a 3-step process that I think is very important to do in order to move somebody from 95% angry to 75% angry, down to 40% angry, down to that 30% angry zone where you can actually reasonably negotiate and bring things to a conclusion.